Today, to kick off 2025, Rick and I are going to walk back through some of our favorite photographic moments and images from 2024. Welcome to 2025. I got Rick out in Printerville East in
Yep.
LeGrand, and I'm here in Portland, Printerville. And we've been, kind of going back and forth over, what are our favorite images from last year, from 2024.
Yeah, we had a
And
we had an epic year. We really did, you know.
we really did. And as I think it's a really valuable exercise. We just had an office hours at the end of 2024, which we can link. You can just click up at the top or in this video's full description, where we talked a little bit about processes to think about building your own portfolio and narrowing your representative work to just those
Right.
few images that really represent what you're capable of and what you're interested in and what your creative eye leans toward. And Rick, you've been through a big process of that.
Yeah. This process we're going to talk about today is actually kind of interesting for me because I look back at 2024 and late 2023 where I really was spending most of my time working on my portfolio, I've got 90,000 photos in my library right now and trying to find the 20 ones that I've shot over the years that I felt represented who I am as a photographer. And
Mm-hmm.
I kind of felt like that's really what I was doing in 2024. I was having fun going on all of these workshops, but I didn't feel like I was in my zone that much when I was shooting because the portfolio process was a lot of work and it took most of the year for me to get down to that point. But then, in the last week or two, I, I started going through all of my photos from this year and, through the techniques that we talk about, how you rate and rank images and which ones you edit and all of that sort of stuff. I realized that I, it was a fun year. I had a lot of fun in the places we went, the workshops, the people we took with us. But I did get
Mm-hmm.
some photographs that I really like. I really like.
I just think it's such a good process, and we're
Yeah,
doing another office hour like within a week. What is it, on the 7th,
on the
January
7th. Yeah.
7th? Where we're going to go through everyone's best image of last year, just the single one. You can run over to hudsonhenry.com/office hours or click the link, or you can look in this video's full description again and submit an image. And we're going to run through, we'll give a few prizes to the ones that we think are more, just stand out to us. But I think that process is so important. And I've learned a lot going through and just picking the images from this year. I'm in the midst of the portfolio review
Right.
process that Rick described, which is gargantuan over the last decades.
Hmm.
But this one from the year really showed me that, I've made a full transition from, I use my zoom lenses as a do it all kitchen sink. I have them with me. I can capture all kinds of stuff with a 24 to 120 and a 100 to 400. But some of the little specialty prime lenses, there were years where I sort of eschewed prime lenses. Well, I got my zooms that cover all that. Why would I need them?
Right.
And now I'm really seeing how special working with a prime is and how it can make you think a little bit differently, and how many of my favorite images from this year come from a limited number of lenses, which we'll see
Yeah,
as we're
yeah,
going
and it's the
through.
same for me. This was, I've been loving primes for years, but I also tend to really rely on my 100 to 400 because I love those extractive landscapes. But when I look back at some of my images from this year, which we'll see, I've got some that, most of them were shot with a prime,
Yeah,
going
yeah,
back into the streets in Venice and Glasgow, walking around with a prime, playing around with
so
your
much fun.
Voigtlander 1.0 on the ZF, so
And I'll say, before we dive in and go through all the images, there's a lot of images from the Voigtlander on the ZF, which is, it's an expensive combo. What is it? Around $3,000 to
yeah,
have these two pieces right here. There's a lot of images from my 400 TC, which is an exotic,
yeah,
expensive lens on the Z9. But I've been playing around, I haven't gotten into this group of images, but the last couple of weeks I've been playing around with the little Z52 with Voigtlander's 23 1.2 lens on it, and that's a special character filled fast little prime where you can, get close and focus in on the subject and blow the rest of the world to smithereens at f1.2, or get nice and sharp and the bokeh's got character and it's interesting, and it's a $500 lens on a $900 body. So
Yeah.
there's all kinds of opportunities to play around in this world. So should we dive in and look at some shots?
Yeah, why don't we take a walk through? Okay. So here's our group. We've got 40 images, and we'll start off.
Kind
I
of
mean, our
going somewhat in order through the year is the plan here.
Yeah, I think that seemed to make the most sense. We we were in some beautiful places shooting together, and it's always I always find it fascinating, especially in the workshops, to see what people shoot because yeah, we stand in front of beautiful places where people are getting very similar shots, but people are also very much into their own thing. And I look at the stuff you shot and some of the things that I shot, and it's like, yeah, there's some commonality, and then there's like, oh, Rick, what are you thinking? Or Hudson, where'd you get that shot? So
Totally.
all right, so let's start. Our first workshop last year, after the first field workshop, was in Charleston, and
After the printing workshops, yeah.
yeah, and one of our, I mean, the Charleston workshop is special to me. I love doing it. One of the reasons I love doing it are the Swamp Garden, Magnolia Swamp Garden, and then the Center for Birds of Prey, where these people,
Mm.
you know, work to rehabilitate injured birds. They do a lot of great work for conservation as well for species that are dwindling. Um, and it's always a fun morning. It's usually the highlight of the the workshop for almost everybody who goes. You know.
It's a wonderful experience with great people that run the center, and our support by bringing a group and having a special event helps them do what they do. But it's also an amazing opportunity to practice your autofocus controls and capture birds in flight because it's just
Yeah.
non-stop for hours. They're flying these birds for us. This is a shot I captured with the 105 1.4, one of the original prime lens that I fell in love with. That was maybe the very first one where I was like,
Hmm.
wow, I love this lens.
Yeah.
And I took it specifically for the portion of the birds of prey where we're in this little forest with owls and the trees are close and they're flying and it's kind of tight quarters. And to really get background separation from the bird, I wanted that 1.4 aperture, and I knew that 105 would be a long enough lens. And I have a lot of shots of many owls, portraits of them perched and
Hmm.
portraits of them in flight. But this one with our host bringing it into the glove, I don't know. This one,
Yeah.
it
This one
just
is
works.
magic,
Yeah,
and the
it
look
just
on
works.
the woman's face is like it's always a crapshoot.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
I believe that's a Eurasian eagle owl. It's such a beautiful owl.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't have an image of the white-faced owl, the little tiny white-faced owl, not the baby, but the white-faced owl, who was deathly afraid of this owl.
Yes. Terrified.
You know.
This might not,
So,
well, yeah. Oh, and then this one, I'm always trying to channel my inner David Archer.
yeah,
You can capture images of these birds especially with the modern technology that we have, bird eye detect and these amazing lenses. So the cows come home. It's easy to get
yep,
sharp shots, but capturing that moment where there's something interesting happening,
yeah.
I like
And
you.
this is at the
What
Swamp
would
Garden.
happen to me out there?
Yeah, that's the other. This is at the
Uh-oh.
Swamp Garden, which is the other place that
Yes.
that, that we
Yeah.
go to frequently during the workshop.
Hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
And this is one that I got with this afternoon where the light was just so magical, It's just,
Magic.
and this year was that I bought the 200 to 600 the year before, last year. And, this was my first time in Charleston with that lens. And it was the right lens for this place for me.
Magic. Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
back at the Birds of Prey Center. One of the things I love about the Birds of Prey Center is I do all these like headshots of these birds, and this is I think one of the buzzards who
Yep.
doesn't get a lot of love, but I, he's got a very striking face, you know.
Wow. I love this expression.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
have
a
so
great
many
shot.
portraits, just headshots of these birds, and I just love them. The grandkids will love to see them, you know.
Of
No,
course.
no. And then,
No,
uh, we get to
windows.
walk around Charleston too, and I get to sort of go after my little penchant for windows and reflections and things like that. And I've got a whole slew of them from Charleston. The Charleston workshop. When I was going through
Uh,
my images, I was kind of amazed at the breadth of imagery that I was able to capture. From everything. And again, this was with the Q2 28 millimeter
and
lens.
I love the way that this pane frame cuts through the reflection. It's perfect the way that you've got the geometry of it, triangles, and yeah, it just works really well. You and your reflections,
I know.
wonderful.
And then we were in
This is
Mazatlan for the eclipse.
Mazatlan for the eclipse. And we all got great images of the eclipse. The eclipse is a technical marvel to capture. It's not our first total eclipse that we photographed. I feel much more ready to capture future total eclipses. But in all honesty, the eclipse image isn't the wow portfolio shot for
Yeah,
me. Everybody's tight eclipse shot is somewhat similar. It was more the people and the experience. And I think, well, you'll see in a moment. My favorite moment from the eclipse is capturing how it feels to be under
yeah,
a total eclipse.
yeah.
But one of the things that was great was running around with my 50 1.0 on the Nikon ZF with its manual focus subject detection. The minute this ZF camera was announced and I read about what manual focus subject detection would do, where it draws a box and I can automatically zoom on an eye and perfect focus, I ordered this lens because I had tested it without that capability and found it a little difficult to get focus right
Mhm.
at f1.0. And so having this on the trip and also having one of my best friends in the world, Sajal, and her son Dylan, who's an amazing young man, along with us on the Mazatlan workshop. I just love being able to capture these environmental portraits of place
Yeah,
and people in such a dreamy way. This lens is just special. As we talk about, you're going to see a lot of Voigtlander 51.0 shots from both Rick and I
yeah,
in this group of images.
yeah. I that lens camera combination just excites me. It really does. Speaking of exciting, then
Yeah,
our friend
this is
Ken.
my favorite shot from the eclipse. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
Steve and Ken. Like you get the feeling for wow,
yeah,
this is when the sun goes completely behind the moon. It gets dark and cold in the middle of the day. The lake gets crazy. There's shimmery, weird moon-shaped patterns. There's an electric, like the hairs stand up all over your
yeah,
body, and it's just everybody can't help but feel energized by it. And I
yeah.
feel like this photo
It
captures
captures
that
it.
to a certain degree.
It does.
hmm Yeah. I had left my camera over on the stand and ran over with my Leica Q3 and was just photographing people experiencing it. And those were my favorite photos from the trip. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. But this
oh,
is
this is
this
great.
shot. I love just wandering around the streets of Mazatlan. I think there was a theme that I had to this year. It was that I got to go back and do a whole bunch of street photography. Being in a city, and we were out shooting all of us this one night, and they're all lined up across the street, and I'm like, hey, you know, I've got a bunch of shots of them, but this is my favorite. It's just sort of like, I just love it.
Ken was ready.
Yep.
Oh, our waitress at the restaurant. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's such a beautiful shot.
Yeah. And
This is
I
with your
was,
50.
yeah, the 51.4, which is a wonderful lens. And I used this lens a ton this year. There were a lot of times I was just walking around with that lens on my A7R5. And this was our waitress, and she was so beautiful and she was so sweet. And I asked her if I could take her portrait, and she said, sure. And she gave me her WhatsApp name, and I sent her the copies of them, and she was overjoyed by them. It was just like this,
Oh.
it's just, it, it, it made me happy just to sort of be back out shooting this way again, and then the doorways, this was like, I felt like, when I landed in Mazatlan, and I think the first thing you said to me was like, you're gonna love doorways here. And sure enough, it was like doorways and windows, and there's all sorts of beautiful street art. And, I've got tons
A
of stuff
little
like,
like being back, little some of the stuff we saw in Havana, like
yeah,
a
yeah.
similar, yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
So, and then
Uh,
you went to
and
Costa
then
Rica.
being in Costa Rica with my own 400 TC, that exotic lens that for years I've always talked about. I have everything I want photographically except the 400 TC. And our good friend Alex, who we'd had on multiple workshops, decided he really wasn't using his, and asked if I knew anyone who wanted to buy a used one. And I know Alex takes such good care of his things. I worked it out with him,
Yeah.
and I took it to
This was
Costa Rica,
this was your
and
inaugural
whew,
expedition with your 400, right? I mean, you'd used David's before, but
man,
yeah.
I
That,
had I had used David's and felt, oh gosh, I should never have touched this lens. This lens is, it is just as close to perfect for wildlife and sports and action and even landscapes. If you're doing extractive work, that they'll work it for. It's just such
yeah.
a spectacular lens, wide open, stop down, and flipping that switch to be able to get to a 560 f4. So it's 400 and you let this background just fall off. And this little Kawadi, I had never gotten good images of them in trips to Costa Rica, and then I run into this baby perched on a tree, and it was,
Yeah.
ugh, I love that shot.
This
Costa Rica
cook.
is the dream location for wildlife shooting. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
and for that lens, and for that lens.
hmm
Yeah.
and for that lens because you're in dark forest. This is another one where without that lens, it wouldn't be as good a shot. If I
Yeah.
worked with my 100 to 400 f4, it wouldn't be f2.8, and they're close into these palm trees. They were taking dates from the trees, and if you had narrower aperture, the trees wouldn't be as beautifully blurred in the background to create that backdrop. And this is barely cropped at all. The ability to
Yeah.
handhold
I
a
know.
lens of this caliber, and ugh, we waited a long time for this shot too. They were picking the nuts, and they had to wait for them to fly and track them, and it was really good exercise for everyone in the group. We were there for quite a long time, tracking them in, tracking them out, tracking. They were going to the same source for this food, and then flying over to another tree to eat it, and then coming back and getting another nut or a date, and
Yeah.
so it was just a perfect place to practice. It's the kind of thing that going out with Dennis Valverde in Costa Rica and David Archer, it's just magic. It's such fun
Hmm.
stuff.
I love
And
this
this
shot. This
was
is one
in
of my favorites of yours from this year. Is this one?
Yeah, it's one of mine too. And it's funny because we were doing macro, and we were set up on the edge of the woods. We brought lighting and things, but it was a pretty bright overcast day, and there were dark woods, and there was a clearing. And this place that we go, they've converted an old palm oil plantation into native habitat, and there are all these conservationists that work there, and some of their work, their conservation work, is funded by bringing groups like us in and letting us photograph the wildlife. And they go out the night before, and they're very careful about handling all the wildlife. But we set up some situations to photograph macro, and we had lighting, but lighting can disturb the animals. And in this case, that beautiful overcast light was sort of bouncing up out of the clearing to the edge of
Yeah.
the woods, and we just set up in the shade on the edge of the woods, and there were all these dark trees. And I had photographed these little frogs before, these little red-eyed tree frogs, and in other subjects, and they're so tiny. And you get really close with a macro. This is with the 105 macro, another amazing prime, like on Z macro. The MC is just an incredible macro lens. But I was looking at this little frog, and you get up really close and fill the frame with just its eye or its nose, and I've done that work before. And then I suddenly thought, this is this little frog in a big world. And
Yeah.
I stepped back a bit and kept it wide open at f2.8, and just, yeah, it worked. It just
All
worked.
that
It
negative
and
space.
moving around a little bit to get the contrast between the frog and that shadow of an out of
Hmm.
focus tree in the background. Yeah.
Yeah. It's wonderful. This is another one that
And
just
this is
moment, man.
Yeah, and it was, we were looking for birds in a place where we had found a lot of them before, but there's been some development from a resort hotel. This is close to where we stay. You can just walk out there and there's waterfowl and stuff. And it's a little less activity than I'm used to there, but there was this one egret and it looked like it was actively after something. And I just happened to hone in and I had the 400 on the Z9 and I was in the right mode. And as I saw it strike the water, I fired a burst and that, 20 frames per second raw,
Hmm.
you can certainly get the moment. And
Yeah.
this one
Yeah.
just worked so well. It
Yeah.
worked
I
so
love the
well.
fly on its back.
Mhm.
It's just, it's crazy. And then here you go, your
On the
crocodile shot.
crocodile. Yeah, I feel like for some reason when I was in Africa in the early 2000s, in Lake Victoria, I got a bunch of wonderful crocodile images. The light and the reflections worked really well with some Nile crocodiles. And then in Costa Rica, it seems as if every trip I wind up with a crocodile in good light. And this is my 400 2.8. The
Yeah.
last time I had a shot like this, which I love, and I use as a screensaver on my computer, it was with the 100 to 400 really dark conditions and it was shot at something like 14,000 ISO and I had to do some heroic noise reduction.
Yeah.
This one's shot at like 800 ISO or 500 ISO and it's just, yeah, it's
Yeah.
noise free and yeah, love it.
It's pretty amazing.
But again, that 400 and one more time with the 400 in Costa
Yeah.
Rica. This closes out my Costa Rica shots. Just you're always looking for a moment with the wildlife where you don't have more of those shots of the bright sky and daylight through the dark leaves. You're trying to get the
Hmm.
animal without bright highlights around it. And this little baby monkey was moving through the trees, and then I saw it stop, and I moved around to where I could put green behind it and then I realized there was a pool of water, where some old branch had died and fallen off and was kind of stumped on the trunk of the tree, and it was
Hmm.
fishing water out of there and drinking out of the little pool of water. And that moment, just there was a moment, I've got a lot of shots of this monkey, and this is the one. It was
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
with the
Those drops
driplets
of
coming
water.
down,
Yeah. This
the
is,
sky reflecting in its eyes.
I have to say, as a man who, is not fond of monkeys, this is one darn adorable monkey.
That's a baby spider monkey right there.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
so cute. Yeah.
All right. So I think after Costa Rica, we ended up in our next workshop was in Glacier, and it was kind of a challenging workshop. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, nope.
Oh, in between that, I was testing Nikon's new Z6 III, and one of my joys is testing a lot of gear. I don't always keep it. I didn't keep the Z6 III, but I was running around on my mom's farm with the kids, and I was, getting them to pose, and they were so excited because there was fun stuff happening on the street by the stream on the farm, and I just this one, it's a joy to be able to get all these shots. My kids act as models, and they get sick of it from time to time.
Yeah.
If you watch my video about the Z52 review, you'll see some shots where my son Pike is smirking pretty. Looks like a hardened teamster on a break.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this
This is,
one, they were joyful, and I
yeah,
love it. Yeah,
a wonderful
yeah,
show. Now we're in Glacier.
Glacier.
Glacier was a bit of a
And it,
challenge this year for us. We
we
had
had
a
a
lot
lot
of
of
smoke,
smoke.
not a lot of clouds,
Mhm.
although we did get some clouds at the end of the day one day that was rather epic. Um,
This was that day. And I
yeah.
remember we were working on shooting the sunset scene, and I had the 400 with me kind of all the time on the Z9 just in case of bears or
Hmm.
some other wonderful
Right.
wildlife opportunity that you get in Glacier. And I just was looking at the sun coming down between those mountains and the clouds, and I picked up the 400 and fired this shot. And I
Yeah.
love it as an extractive landscape. But through the smoke, you
Hmm.
can really get all the detail in the sun. And yeah, that one
Yeah.
worked for me.
Yeah. And then
Ugh,
this is Goose Island one morning. Um, and again, it was really kind of hazy and smoky. It was really warm when we were there, which sort of kept the wildlife away. But, that's just the layers that morning were just wonderful. And I think this was also the morning we saw that eagle just sort of perched on a tree, which
it was.
if I had been able to include 30 images, that eagle would probably be in there. But this one, this was a special morning for me. I really loved that. just sort of.
You were working your composition so well at this blue hour, sort of blue hour where the penumbra is coming across, and you get that rosy color and the smoke hanging over the crest there. But this is one where I look at it and I go, oh, I should have been working more in the blue hour. I was trying to find the right composition for a panorama when the light hit, and when the light hit, it wasn't as good.
Yeah, yeah,
This is wonderful, and also some wind came up and obscured the reflections more.
yeah.
And this is just wonderful. This is a wonderful shot.
And then
Uh,
this was on Lake McDonald that one morning we went out
hmm
and we were going on and you handed me the ZF with the Voigtlander 1.0 on it. And I wandered around and took some pictures of people and was just having fun with the camera. I mean, this is where I was like, oh, I could do this. But this,
Handheld and pre-dawn.
yeah, it was just amazing. I just I really enjoyed it. You know,
Hmm
this one was with
Is that?
this one's not with the 1.0. This one I think I had my camera
Mhm.
the 24 120 on it and just scrambled to catch this guy just sort of looking off into the distance. Again, wasn't a great sunrise. There weren't a lot of clouds or anything, but the blue hour was just magnificent. It was just wonderful.
And this serves as a reminder to a lot of people. I think we all show up for this moment, which Rick just put up. But go
Yeah,
back one, go back one. These moments before dawn and these times after sunset can
yeah,
be the most magical of all. They
yeah,
really, really can. The blue hour, as that last blue light comes around the bend from the sun setting behind or before the sun rises, and you get the gradient from blue to orange in the sky. Those moments are spectacular. And I often see photographers packing up the minute that the sun rims
yeah,
down or
yep,
showing up a second before it rims up. And there's so much beautiful work to be done, particularly with our cameras capable of capturing such epic imagery at higher ISO.
yep,
Oof.
yep,
So
yep.
this sunset that Rick is showing here, we had been to this location and talked about what it would be like if there had been clouds the night before, the very
Yes,
night
the night
before. And
before.
there were no predictions for clouds. And Rick and I had been here the year before without good clouds, and we'd been the year before that and looked at this location and thought, wow, the way the river runs right
Hmm.
towards where the sun sets this time of year, this is like the going to the sun highway epic spot for a sunset. Now, this is a pretty smoke-filled evening,
Yeah,
but it really worked out. So the next day we'd gone up there and we really hadn't anticipated even going back to this spot. We talked about if you're ever here and there's clouds at sunset, you might want to go
yeah,
here because the way that it'll look beautiful at sunset. And then that night we were up near the pass, Logan Pass, photographing mountain goats and looking for bighorn sheep, and we saw the clouds setting up and we were like, we should go tonight.
yeah.
And sure enough, the next
And
night,
and some of my
and I guess I
favorite
just love.
candids from the whole Glacier Workshop were taken of people shooting this. There was just it was like 15 minutes of just joy on the looks of everybody's faces. It was so wonderful. It really
And
was.
believe it or not, this is a handheld bracketed burst with the ZF camera with the 24 to 120 on it.
Yeah,
I bracketed 3 stops underexposed. Actually, I think I bracketed 4 stops underexposed, 1 stop underexposed, 2 stops overexposed. So it's bracketing 3 stops below your metered setting and 3 stops above your metered setting, but I dialed in 1 stop of exposure underexposure before I started because I was
yeah,
looking at the histogram and where those tones were landing in the histogram, and I felt like I needed to get a little more less exposed sky in the overexposed frame. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
what a
Magical.
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful night. Magical.
And
Ah,
I
and
love
the
this shot of David.
51.0.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was having so much fun photographing these details and the rapids and rocks and
Hmm.
water. This is right alongside the going to the sun highway. There's just beautiful ripples and rapids and little waterfalls and
Yeah.
gorgeous rocks. And I've realized over time that one of the things I love to do is put people in landscape.
Hmm.
I love landscape photography. I love people photography, but I love environmental portraiture. And so when I
Yeah.
can get a shot that just shows someone in their element, and
Yep.
the Voigtlander 51.0 on my side on the ZF is just a wonderful way to do that, to be able to blur the background in such an interesting way too.
And
So
you did this with a neutral density filter on, right? So that you could get that.
yes, I did. I
Yeah.
did. So I often in broad daylight carry the Voigtlander 51.0 with a three-stop case magnetic neutral density filter just clicked onto the front of it to just hold the exposure back a little bit because often the Nikon ZF only runs up to 4,000th of a second shutter speed, and sometimes that's not enough at f1 at a base ISO of
Yeah.
100. So that way I can shoot at the base ISO of 100, get the maximum dynamic range, but still get my shutter speed down in the 1,000, 2,000th of a second
Hmm.
range with that three stops in neutral density. Correct.
Right. Okay. I think the next place we were out on the Oregon coast shooting, right?
Yep. Mm, Yep. 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 The
This
North
night was
Oregon coast.
Amy got us to go up to Astoria, and we had a
Hmm.
magical night up there. Um,
We did.
just wandering along
Shoot
underneath the bridge.
blue hour in the fog with pilings and the bridge. And then as we were about to wrap up, I think this is Cliff walking back toward us down the
Hmm.
railroad track. This is a converted railroad tracks into a public boardwalk along the edge of the bay there in Astoria, and just working with that 51.0 again,
Yeah.
close focusing and letting everything be a bit of a mystery in the dark, handheld. I
And
love
black
it.
and white works so well here. It really
Mhm.
does. I had
Really
a
does.
different shot of Jim Orsetti shooting with the bridge and in color, and I tried putting it in black and white, and it didn't work as well. But it was such a fun night.
It was a fun night.
And this is
Oh, I
this is
love
one
this
of my
shot, Rick.
favorite. Yeah, this is one of my favorites from that workshop. This was down by Haystack Rock. We were waiting that night, hoping that the this was the moon setting, over the
Liver
ocean,
Moon.
and it was really hazy. It was really hazy, and it was doubtful we are going to see anything. And then, but I kept an eye on it, and I
A
was trying.
beautiful sunset, though.
It was a beautiful sunset. And
Mhm.
then all of a sudden you could see the just the silhouette of that moon, and I just screamed to a bunch of people who were near me. I'm like, "Get your long lenses out! The moon is out!" And Jim Morsetti has a wonderful shot too that he took that's just from a slightly different perspective. But
Yeah,
this
I
one is,
loved both of your shots.
yeah, this one
Mhm.
is just special for me. It really is. It's one of my
I love
favorite
it.
shots of the year. Again, extractive, right? Just this is 100 to 400 at 400. So
Extractive and minimalist, and the seabirds are just amazing,
yeah, yeah. So
perched in their nighttime nests. And then Rick was happy to get to the Dolomites. I
yeah,
I
yes,
have a
I
lot
was.
of, classic. Like I said, I love putting people in place. And
Yeah,
yeah, this shot of Rick, there's so much joy. It's like I kept,
yeah.
you know,
This was fun. This was our scouting trip for a workshop that we'll do in the Dolomites in 2026, and I knew it was going to be beautiful. I mean, I expected it to be beautiful, but it was even more beautiful than I could even conceive. And as you see in a couple minutes, it was like, so the Dolomites. We did the Dolomites, and then we decided we were going to hang out in Venice for a couple of days to shoot there, and it was it channeled back to that, Mazatlan shooting at night, Havana shooting at night. But, you
yeah.
know, the Dolomites, I've been lots of places. I haven't been to Patagonia, but the Dolomites just were stunningly beautiful to me. I can't wait to lead a group of people here to shoot. I really can't.
It,
You know,
and the culture is great too. I
yeah,
mean, just the little mountain towns and churches and restaurants and it's yeah, the little twisty switchback roads and passes and yeah, it's wonderful. And Italian food, it's
yeah.
yeah,
My wife loves this
Dolomites are pretty
shot.
great.
My wife is always
I
happy
love it.
when I come back from the workshops, and Hudson's got some pictures he's taken of me. She loves to see them. I print them up and put them on our little wall, and she loves this one. I love this one. I actually look good in this
I
one.
love, you look great. Yeah, yeah.
And
And this is another one of mine. This was we went to this to this lake that's very famous, Lago Braes in the
yeah,
Dolomites. That it's like it's known as the Instagram lake. And the day that
yep,
we got there, we got hit by an early unexpected snowstorm. And it was, kind of heavy, wet snow, like I'm
yeah,
used to here in Portland when we get a snowstorm, but it was soaking heavy, wet snow. And
yeah,
we went out there and we're like, huh, what do we do? And I had the little Leica Q3, the 28 millimeter, and I went vertical and I shot a pano and I wonder how this will work. You
yeah.
know,
It came out
I
beautiful.
couldn't quite get, and it came out beautifully. It came out
Yeah.
beautifully.
Well, it was funny. This day, I think we both walked down and we just took our cues with us because it's like we're not going to get a lot of stuff here, not today, and
Yeah.
you know,
We'll just
and
scout. So we,
yeah, and we went out. We just went up off the path a little bit, and this is, you were in that spot, and I was in that spot, and I'm looking out, and I'm like, what am I going to shoot? And then all of a sudden, I see this guy with the umbrella, you know, just sort of he puts it up and walks out to the edge of the little path there, and it was like, okay, I will get that image, and I shot a bunch of them, but this one I just love, you know,
I love it too.
it captures it so well, you know.
My only thought when I saw that guy down there was like, I wish I had an umbrella.
Yeah, it was coming down. It was coming down,
And it
and
was wet.
yeah, and this was a beautiful day. This is up at the Suisse, uh,
Alpe de Susi.
Susie,
Yeah,
and there were it's like it's the highest alpine meadow in Europe. Is that correct? That's the
correct.
yeah,
And
and
that
it is
mountain is Salsalungo.
yeah. We had to take a ski tram up to the top of this
Hmm.
meadow, so we're pretty high up here, and there's all of
Hmm.
these like sort of walking paths down through here, and these little cabins, and it's an amazing place. And we all spent a bunch of time just sort of wandering down in this meadow,
Good.
and I was
Hmm.
having a hard time down below. I just was. And so I'm like, well, I think I'm going to go up. And what I wanted to do was come up, and I was in love with the clouds that were just sort of moving through the mountains. And I was like, well, I'll go up and I'll do a time lapse. And so I got my 100 to 400 set up, and I'm really doing a very narrow time lapse, just right up here.
Yeah.
And it hadn't been there really hadn't been a lot of light on the landscape. And then all of a sudden, the sun came out and just like just as you can see, and was like I grabbed my cue and just like stood up high on the bench that I was by, got as high as I could, and just like fired off a bunch of shots. And just this one, this this was my favorite image from the trip. And it's not an amazing image, but it captures a moment that was just so happy. It was just
Mm.
wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I was down. David and I were hustling to get back to you and catch the last gondola down, and we had hiked a little out further towards where there's a little bit of snow in the trees in the middle ground there. And coming back, I saw there was a gap in the west as the sun was
Yeah.
dropping, and I said, "There's going to be light." And we found a little spot, and I photographed just some of these trees with shadows playing out across the meadow with the mountains, as kind of a background. But it didn't work as well from down low with the mountains as it did
Yeah.
from up above. I'm glad you were up there. It's beautiful, and that's a great moment. Great recognizing that light, and it just works. Love the sky.
Yeah.
Speaking of sky,
Yeah.
wow.
I
Yeah,
just love
Trace
this one.
Chimneys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
That was a,
Beautiful.
a wonderful, I mean, it was kind of like shooting fish in the barrel in some places because this was literally from the parking lot where we were, but
You
it
can
just,
hike out onto that
yeah.
ridge in the foreground too, and then there's mountains that are looming above us, and you get this amphitheater. I'd like to go out there when we run the workshop,
Yeah.
and it's maybe a little less fresh snow. I mean, it was a weird fall storm that we got this time
Yeah.
around, but I'd love to go out there and do a 360-degree pano. I think that would just be amazing.
Yeah.
because it's all around you. It's 360 degrees of this. I don't do a lot of 360-degree panos because I'm not someplace where it's so epically amazing in 360
Hmm.
degrees. But this is one of them. This is
Yeah.
one of them.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then
Venice.
Venice. Venice.
I love this shot. Oh,
Venice. Venice surprised the heck out of me. I mean,
me too.
it's an amazing place. And I mean, I think you and I, when we were done in Venice this time, we're like, okay, when we do the Dolomites workshop, we'll do a workshop in Venice on the front end of the back end, a separate workshop.
100%.
And
100%.
I could have spent a week of nights shooting there, just sleeping during the day, getting up, getting something to eat around, shortly before sunset, and then just hanging out in town, blue hour, and till midnight, and then go home, go back to sleep. I mean, it's just, I was so in love with wandering the streets of Venice at night. I just had my 51.4. You had your 51.0. It was
Mm.
just such a beautiful place to shoot. The architecture was amazing.
50.
This was just shot
Yeah.
from my our balcony. It was just like this one night. The
Yeah.
clouds were just amazing, but it's like just the textures and the old architecture was just something else. You know?
I loved my time in Venice. Yeah, and I had some shots too. It surprised me. I expected, it to be super touristy and commercialized, and sure, that
Yeah,
exists there. But there's a reason why so many people are going there, and it's so unique visually, and it just is a place that shouldn't even exist the way that it
yeah,
does. And photographically, Rick's so dead right. From that golden light playing off across all these little canal streets to the night with the reflections. It's just incredible.
yeah, yeah. It was. I did not want to leave Venice, which surprised me. Really surprised me.
Yeah.
I mean, I love cities,
Hmm.
but I
Yep.
didn't expect it, and I'm so glad we went, and I cannot wait to go back. You know,
Oh yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So we left and went to Scotland, where
We were in Sky with a wonderful group of photographers.
a wonderful group of
From
photographers and our good friend Mark Smith, who was in the workshop and lives in Portland,
yes.
drove by your house and picked up from
Hmm.
your wife the Leica Q343 and brought it to Scotland with him so we could shoot with it. And
Indeed.
you and I went back and forth shooting with it over the course of the week. We loved the camera. It's an amazing camera.
It is.
And when I saw this shot of yours, I was like, wow, this is, I think, my favorite photo of yours from the year, if that's possible. It's
It's
just,
just grown on me more and more, and it literally was just walking along in the high tide debris of kelp and sea stuff along the edge of the fishing boat landing area in the town of Portree on the Isle of Skye. And I just looked
yeah,
down and there was this feather catching the light. And I thought to myself, I wonder how the Q3's macro mode works. And I hit F11, dialed the aperture to f11, moved the lens into its macro mode, focused in on the feather, and took the shot. Composed it, and I didn't think a whole lot more about it. And then when I got
yeah,
the image back, I was just like, "Oh wow,
it's
yeah,
just
it
wonderful.
really."
Yep. Yes. Chap is very happy with the
Hmm.
Q343 that we gave to him
Hmm.
after.
I think Elizabeth
So,
got one too, right?
yep.
Elizabeth got a Q343. Chap's got a Q343. There are people whose eye tend toward um that focal length, that
Yeah.
kind of normal focal length.
Hmm.
And for them, that camera as a hip walk arounder is super special. For me, the 28 millimeter Q3 makes more sense, and I really can't rationalize two
Yeah.
$7,000 fixed lensed cameras,
Yes.
uh, but it's wonderful.
Yep.
It's a wonderful camera.
Yeah. It was such a great workshop. This was our first workshop in Scotland, and you know, and this I think is if not favorite, my second favorite of your shots this year. You should tell the story about this one. It is
Well,
great.
there were these pigeons and they were flying around, and there was a distillery behind me that had a big sign, Glasgow distillery. And I thought, well, if I could get the pigeons in flight with the distillery sign, and I was really working that, but it's far away from me. All I had with me was the ZF and the 51.0, which I adore walking around doing street photography with. You have to manually focus, but I was doing a bit of zone focusing. I think I was out at like F11, and I had made sure I had infinity in focus with as close to me as possible. And I just remember turning and I suddenly realized, well, all the pigeons are actually aggregating around these people. And I
Yep.
look back at Rick, who's, he's looking at his images on the Q343 probably.
Yep.
And and I just, this man is there feeding the pigeons with his child, and they're
Yep. Right.
all around there. And every now and then they would rise up, and I just put the camera in burst mode. I was hyper focused, Infinity was in focus with as close to me, that sort of classic street style with the 50 at F11. And I just fired a burst as these birds came through. And as I was watching it happen, the woman in the frame, I could show you a series of these frames, and everyone is doing things. They're moving, there's action happening. Rick is walking, the father and child are moving around. The guy sitting to the left is looking around, but the woman never moves an inch as chaos just transpires around her, with those gloves on. And I don't know, as I fired it, I knew I saw this one come through the viewfinder, and I knew that it was going to be
Yeah.
great. And then when I was editing it, I was just like,
Yeah. This
wow,
is this is
I
this
love
is
it.
the Cartier-Bresson decisive moment. It really is. It's just it is something else. And black
Well,
and
and
white, it works so well.
somehow the birds are between everyone and
Yeah.
haven't really obscured anyone. Even the bird between her chest and her hands.
Yeah. I know. I know. It's just wonderful.
Yeah,
This one,
I do
this
love this
one, you
shot.
got to print this one. You need to print this one. Good size.
This one's this one's probably angling into my portfolio. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
would agree.
I do love it. I do love it. It's sharp, sharp, sharp too. And I love this shot. I love this
Yeah.
shot of yours. This is
This is
Rick at
nighttime in
the
Glasgow.
mm,
We're wandering the streets. I was
mhm,
practicing with the Q343, and this guy was, he and I were engaging, and I have a whole series of
yeah.
shots of him. I had a shot where this woman moves through the frame, and she's here, and then she's here, and as she's here, she is blowing me a kiss, but
It's
she is,
probably distracting. It's like one too many
yeah,
things.
and she's too out of focus. I mean, it's like you can kind of tell
Mm,
what's going on, but I had this one where just this woman's walking out of the frame and this whole side was open, and it just,
mm,
again, I love it. It's like being out on a street at night in a city is just, it's that's one of my jams for sure, for sure.
yep. It'll for sure. You definitely look at, and not even at night only. I love this
Yes,
shot. We
yeah.
don't know these people.
No, we
You know,
don't
it's,
know these people,
this is the streets of,
but
of Portree.
she's giving me the eye because I was there
Oh
for
yeah,
about a minute and a half shooting, and I've got a bunch of different ones, but this one just kind of like, you know, like what are you doing? And this was you
I
and I
love
had
it.
switched, and I was back to your
Mm,
Q328, and you were shooting with the 43. That, and I think this might even be the day when you got the feather shot, but it was like
yeah.
this was why this was one of the images that was like this is why I want to keep the 28, my Q2
Yep.
because it's like these are the types of shots that I love, you know.
Yeah, and with the narrow street, you wouldn't have been able to get that with the 43.
Yeah, And this was a morning when I took a group of people up to Kirang for sunrise, and we were just socked in with fog and rain. And we came down the
Mm,
backside of Kirang because it was like it was not going to clear. And we stopped at this pullout up above the town of Uig, and you could tell that things were starting to change, and you could start to see a little bit of blue sky, and the 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 mist and the clouds were lifting, and there was light on the water, and I mean the three of us, me, Charlie Mosier, and Elizabeth, were there for an hour and a half, just watching, what was going on. And we all got some magical shots from this place, and it's
mm.
one of those things where it was like from the weather radar we were looking at, Kirang was not going to going to open up that day, and so we're like, all right, we'll come back another morning. Um, you know, you guys were up at store, and you had similar where it was not, there was a lot of fog up there. Um,
We saw nothing.
yeah,
We're
yeah,
in that cloud.
yeah. So,
It happens.
you know,
It
and then a couple
happens.
days later, we each we went back to Kirang and you went back to store, and we had
Mhm.
similar challenging weather. A squall came
Oh,
through that was just
hmm
horrible. I mean, it was like I was soaked to the bone, and you were up on
as our
store,
as
and
our friend Fabio calls it, a rovescio, a
yeah,
squall, a storm, a blast of cold, blowing rain, and we stood in it, and we were covered in fog for a minute. But I had been watching the sky, and I said, I think there'll be a break after this, and we actually got some beautiful landscape shots. But this photo of our trail up and down to the Old Manor store, I don't know, just the way the light played and the way this worked
yeah,
out. This is my favorite.
yeah,
I just love this scene, just the light and the landscape and the trail, and it works in black and white for me. Yeah,
yeah. It it
yeah.
was it was absolutely wonderful, absolutely wonderful, and
And it's another example why the Q3 2028 is the
yeah,
camera for me. I had that on my hip. The big camera is packed away in the bag. I'm on the trail. This light starts to play. I pick it up, and I'm a guy who loves sky and
yeah,
foreground.
yeah,
And, that
yeah,
focal length works for me. Anyhow, go ahead. Sorry,
yeah.
Rick.
And then the next morning, or that same morning, we're up in Kirang. We had that
Mm,
squall,
mm,
and this time I was looking at the weather, and it's like it looks like it's going to pass, and we're gonna get some light. And we ended. I mean, like I said, we were soaked to the bone.
mm.
I'd forgotten to come up with my rain pants that I had to hike back and put them on. But still was soaked. But as we watched, the morning just got more and more beautiful. The clouds started to lift, and just this is called the table, I think, in
Mm.
Kirang, and these little dots are sheep. I
Deep.
mean,
Yeah,
this it's massive, and we had this
I
moment
love
where
this
the
image.
sun came out, and it was just magical,
We
and
have to trade once next year. I would love to go do Kirang at dawn. It's
yeah,
beautiful.
it is
Yeah.
beautiful. So, but anyway, so that's our sort of top of the year. Um,
There we go. Wow. Well, it has been wait, last year was an amazing photographic year. This year
it was,
promises to be just as great. And we've got some fun stuff in store, some great trips.
yeah,
Rick, it's been just a pleasure. And all of you who've been on workshops with us, it was so great to have you all. And we're
yeah,
looking forward to an amazing 2025.
yes, we are.
So
So, and
that
don't
was
forget to
fun.
check out. If you hung out with us all this way, don't forget to check out the everyone else's best photo of the year in office hours on the 7th.
Yep.
It's
And submit
one
your
of those
own.
things we love to see every year.
Hmm. Yep. All right. So we will hopefully see you in the office hours on the 7th. Rick, hey, thanks so much. This was a ton of fun
You
and
got it.
instructive.
Yep. Happy
And
New Year.
I hope Happy New Year, everybody. Enjoy. And let's get after 2025. Let's stay creative and let's have a good time this year. All right.